Hey everyone, this is Barbara Carr with Fuse Empire, and you are tuning in to the Barbara Talks Business Podcast. We start as a video podcast on YouTube. You can look us up under Fuse Empire on YouTube, and then we convert this into an audio podcast on all of your favorite podcasting platforms. So today is season 2, episode 13 of the Barbara Talks Business podcast. And I am here today with Kurt Koster, who is with Legacy Leadership Forums. And I am so thrilled to talk with you guys today about what Kurt does as a living. And if you like talking about God and you like talking about business, you are in the right place today, because that is the essence of our conversation. We are talking about both God and business in the same conversation. I love it. So we'll talk more about Legacy Leadership Forums here in a few moments, but I want to give you the title of our talk, which is God's Vocational Calling on Your Life. So this is a conversational type format. So we want you guys to feel comfortable asking questions and chiming in. So if you're watching this on YouTube or on Facebook right now, feel free to share it with your friends, anybody who loves talking about God and business in the same conversation. And don't be shy about putting comments in the chat. Interact with us. If you're watching now, feel free to say hello. In fact, I'm going to go into the chat myself in just a moment to keep an eye on any questions that come through. But let us know if you're here so that we can greet you. And keep in mind that you do have an opportunity to win $50 cash from Fuse Empire later in the episode. So pay attention to that. And before we jump into the topic that we have today, I want to tell you guys a little bit more about Kurt and Legacy Leadership Forums. Okay, so Kurt is dedicated to assisting Christian business leaders to discover and fulfill their vocational calling. And we all have one. And because Christian business leaders have an internal sense of calling from God that they are trying to fulfill. However, this is very difficult to do in our world, because as entrepreneurs, we're going to try to do it all by ourselves. Anybody feeling convicted right now? Right? So Legacy is here to come alongside you in order to inspire, encourage, and equip you to grow in your leadership. They're also here to make sure that you are doing it with other like-minded leaders and not alone. So of course, God is here to help us with our calling that he's given us, the desires he's put in our heart. But God never intended for us to do this alone. And that's why I love that Legacy exists, because we need legacy and people like Legacy who are serving the calling of others. And so Kurt is the executive director of Legacy Leadership Forums, which is a Christian ministry for business owners and leaders in the Midwest. Before joining Legacy, Kurt served as the Midwest Ministry and Regional Director for Children's Hunger Fund, and their headquarters was in Los Angeles, California. Kurt and his wife Joyce live in Crown Point, Indiana, where he is blessed to serve as an elder with his local church. When he's not working, Kurt enjoys kayaking, snowmobiling, running, and he and his wife Joyce have 3 grown children and 3 grandchildren. So that is exciting. And you guys, I have to tell you, I recently attended an informational lunch with Kurt, and Carla is the other leader's name in Legacy Forum that I met. She's not here today, but she's wonderful. You'll meet her sometime in the future, I'm sure. But Kurt, I'm so impressed with all that Legacy does. And I know that you guys are here to serve those that God is calling to whatever that is that he's calling them to. And so can you explain a little bit to the audience how Legacy Leadership Forums is exactly positioned to be able to serve these callings?
Yeah, sure. First of all, thanks for having me on, Barbara. This is very exciting to talk with you and to meet your audience and stuff. This is just a thrill for me. Legacy is situated simply because as we were created, founded, if you will, by a gentleman by the name of Carl Bunder in 2008. He had spent the previous 20 years working with business leaders wrapped around the very concept of what does it mean to lead a business as a steward to the Lord. So this is a very Christian, God-focused ministry since its inception. Now, I came and joined the organization in 2012. I've been just honored to be part of this for the last almost, 9.5 years. And the thing that I love so much about this particular ministry isn't because we necessarily have all the answers. I mean, we have a lot of experience. We've been working with a lot of business leaders for a long time. But what really gets me excited is when I see these like-minded business leaders getting together. Mm-hmm. We simply set a stage for them, give them some guidelines, if you will, and say, okay, now, what is God saying to you for each other? And so instead of a business leader being entrepreneurial, and I understand being entrepreneurial, I am a bit entrepreneurial myself, but a business leader who starts to hear from other business leaders who get their world, some great counsel, some great guidance, some really effective advice, is when you start to see that I don't have to do this alone. I actually can learn and be so much, maybe even better, simply by wrapping myself with wisdom. And that's what we get in a legacy group, is we get a lot of wisdom being poured out for each member.
Yeah. And, when I met you first, Kurt, a couple of years ago now, I was so interested in the program. And I know at the time you guys have been doing this with men for, like you said, over a decade, right? And I wanted in so bad. And it was like, at the time, there wasn't the women's opportunity. And now there is an opportunity for women to get involved. And it is being head up by Carla, who I mentioned earlier. But women seem to have some different struggles in business than men do. And so if you're a woman watching this right now, I want you to tell us in the chat your biggest struggles, because later I have some questions for Kurt regarding struggles in the business world, as specifically as they relate to bringing God in. But before we get there, I do want to talk about 3 of the big things that Legacy hits on and give people a little bit of a taste of what this looks like. So, Kurt, the first one is identity. Talk to me about identity with Legacy.
Yeah, particularly when we're talking about God's people, when we become, I'm going to say the word saved. I'm going to make some assumptions that your audience is aware of what I mean when I say that. But when we are saved, our identity shifts, and we become now a member of the kingdom of Jesus Christ. He has a people. The Bible's clear about that we are now God's people. But with that being God's people comes an identity of being God's people. Like, what does it mean to be God's people? We need to explore that clearly so that we know what's changed, what's shifted. I can remember back when I was brought into my own personal salvation with Jesus Christ, everything changed for me. I mean, for me, it was in an instant, just everything changed. So what do I do with that becomes the question. I don't even know what to do with myself. I see the world so differently in this moment. And so how do we as God's people work that out? What does God's identity really mean to us? To be a royal priesthood, a holy nation of people for God's own possession. And so seeing God as our Father, seeing Jesus Christ as our Lord and Savior means an awful lot into how we think and how we treat each other, what it means to love each other. Takes on such a magnitude for God's people. So that's the first thing we need to really settle into, is what is our identity? And then what is our purpose? Identity.
Kurt, before you move on to purpose, I want to interject a moment there too with the whole identity thing, because I know that when I first became a Christian and was saved as well, I struggled with that for a long time, with what does that mean for me and who am I? And some of the people watching this or listening to it might have the same thoughts. Maybe they're newly saved right now and they're trying to discover that identity. But one of the things I've learned over the years is even discovering the identity isn't enough to continue to remind yourself who God says you are, right? Because it's so easy for us to accept what other people say that we are, who they say we are, who we tell ourselves that we are, right? But like, we are who God says we are, regardless of everything and everyone else around us. And
Yes.
and I have really struggled with that. With, I have to remind myself regularly. It doesn't matter who she says I am or who I think I am. It matters who God says I am. And really, honing in on that identity and owning it and keeping it, I think is partly the biggest struggle, in my opinion.
Well, I'm so glad you said that, Barbara. That is so profound. And that is why I believe that we can't do this alone. That's one of the reasons that I believe we can't do this alone, because there's all kinds of voices in our world that want to tell us who we are. And go ahead.
You're so right. My son just turned 18 just a couple of days ago. And he has all these people in his world now telling him what he should be trying to do, what he should be doing with his life, and who he is, and this and that. And I sat back, like, listening to this poor kid hear all these negative things spoken over him and to him. And I sat there at my desk hearing this, and I decided, you know what, I have to go for a walk, because it's not going to help him to keep hearing all this from other people. And they all mean well. All these people love him, right? They mean well. But I had to go for a walk and pray. And my greatest prayer that I repeated over and over and over on this 2-mile walk was, God, let James know who you say he is. Show him who you say he is. Who cares what anyone else thinks, including me? Right? Like, of course I love the kid and I want great things for him, but it doesn't matter who I want him to be or who I say he is. It's who God, show him who you say he is. And I pray that now that that's happened, I have been praying that regularly. It's become my most popular prayer the past couple of days.
Well, and that's fantastic, because when God tells you who you are, he means it. Yes. And it is an identity that is full of love and intentionality, and it has an amazing future, and it restores us from maybe a bumpy past. I mean, it's just astonishing to be part of that. So yeah, God needs to give us our identity.
Yep. So let's go on to the next big topic that I know that Legacy does hit on as well, which is purpose.
Yeah. So out of that identity, once we begin to understand, I will say it that way, because we always are growing into this stuff, right? I mean, I'm 62 and I'm still learning and learning and learning. So once we start to get into this whole concept of identity, we start to realize that we've been put into this family of God for a reason. What is that reason? And that becomes our purpose. See, there's a new purpose for God's people, and it's not just to make it through the day, or hopefully have as defined by the world, a successful life. There's far richer things for God's people than that. And so even though success might be included and can be worked for and strived for, there's this bigger picture of that, and that is leading a good life, a life that is full of rich goodness that only comes from God. And so that's what we're seeking. That's what we're looking for, is how do we live this good life as a business owner, as an entrepreneur, because that doesn't change. We're still who we are. We're still attracted to the things that we're supposed to be attracted to. You are different than me, and that's a great thing, because that makes it a bigger thing than just one of us would be by ourselves. And that's just true. Just it complete expands as you add people. So our uniqueness and entrepreneurial thing should never go away. It's just now, how do we live this talent out? To what end? And that's where we start talking about purpose.
That's real good. And I love that you're with other people who are looking for that same direction, right? And they're not just other people that you found on the street that don't know you and don't know God, but they're people who are gathering with you regularly to know you and love you, and together you're growing with each other and with God and towards God. And I just think that that makes your purpose search a whole lot more fun.
I agree. Because you're with people that are doing the same thing.
Yeah.
So they're living out their purpose, growing into this identity, living out their purpose in the business world. And it's a for-profit business world. Businesses don't suddenly become charities. You know, you've got to make money to breathe. We talk about profit isn't the point of the business, but it's like breathing. You don't live to breathe, but you need to breathe to live.
Right.
So that you can do the bigger things, so that you can do the important things. Well, business is no different. We need profit in order to breathe, in order to live, but that's not the purpose. There's more that we can do. There's blessing the people in the business. There's blessing the people that are partnering with us in business, giving them an example of what a good life looks like. Honestly, how do we love each other in front of the world becomes part of that, what we give away, or how we live that out. But we have to have profits in order to be sustainable to continue that on.
Yeah, no, for sure. And I know a lot of people do wonder that question that you just touched on about, like, is it sinful to make money, to make a profit? And of course it's not. And you hit on it at a meeting recently that, money isn't evil. It's the love of money that's evil, right? And in
Right.
my time management course, I actually touch on that too, where I share one of the scriptures where it says, you can't serve two masters, right? So is God your master, or is money your master? It's okay to make money and use it to serve the Lord and his people, but if you're living for the money, if your purpose is the money, then then you are doing it in a way that probably doesn't stand with biblical principles.
Right. Right. And I would even go so far as to say I hope that godly people make a lot of money. Now they
Yeah.
need to be cautious because there's a responsibility that gets attached with that, because God doesn't give us money just for us. And
Right.
so how do we love people around us with the money that we've been given becomes part of that conversation.
Yep.
But all the good that can be done just through the tool of money, because it's all it is, just a tool,
Hmm.
can be just astronomical. And that's honestly why I love talking to people like you, Barbara, and your audience, because you guys are the world changers in the world. You will affect more people than I will ever know. And that excites me.
Several years ago, it's probably been close to a decade at this point, but I had learned that I had a poverty mindset with money, and I just didn't think of money in a positive light. And I was a business owner at that time too, right? And so I struggled month after month after month. And so I went through some courses. I'm always looking to develop myself and to grow. And so I went through some courses and learned that I had a very unhealthy relationship with money, and I had to learn a way to have a healthy relationship with it. And one of the ways that I actually turned my thinking around was that I had to tell myself, the more money that my business makes, the more I can impact other people in this world, right? The more that I can serve others. And at that time I wasn't a Christian yet, but I still had that like mindset to be able to turn it around, that if I see it as I'm making money to help others, I won't think about, that it's bad to make money. And
Right.
obviously
Great.
since then I've grown a lot, but I do think a lot of us in this culture have a negative view of money, and it doesn't have to be that way. You know, we learn lots of principles about using money, specifically stewarding God's money here on earth. Everything he gives us, every resource he gives us, we're to steward it, for his good, and that includes money.
Right. Right. No, it's a wonderful tool in the hands of good people. It's wonderful.
Yeah.
So by all means, I pray God gives you all that you can stand.
Thank you. I accept that. All right, let's move on and talk about discipleship. And this term may or may not be new for some people. I know it was new for me about a year ago when I learned it at my church, Living Stones. But I feel like I've been so blessed to be at Living Stones because they offer us things like, the gathering where you came and were introduced to us, and Kingdom at Work, and, that I'm going to at the end of the month. And discipleship, like they actually do discipleship training at our church. And if they didn't do that, I don't know if I'd know what discipleship is. So let's talk a little bit about that, starting first with what it is.
Okay, discipleship is not complicated, but it's not easy. And what I mean by that is that discipleship is simply learning how to be like Jesus Christ. Now, that's not easy, not by any means. It takes a lifetime of learning, and you never arrive, right? There's always room to grow in that. But it is a journey. It is a growing journey spiritually. And it affects all parts of it. It affects our relationships with God, it affects our own relationship with ourselves. It affects our relationship with other people. So it affects everything that we do, even our relationship with creation. It affects everything because it helps us see everything from God's point of view. And that takes time. That takes time. So discipleship is not a 6-week course. It's not just a series of words that you learn. It is a lifestyle.
Right.
And so what I get excited about with Legacy is that there's an element of discipleship that we bring to the business leader as a business leader. So there are a lot of topics in the Bible relating to leadership. How should we be leaders? Well, we explore those topics thoroughly. For instance, what does it mean to have integrity as a leader? Well, let's explore that. And so we explore integrity deeply. We explore interpersonal relationships as a leader. What does that mean to be Christ-like with these relationships? What does it mean to be Christ-like in reference to money, in reference to success, in reference to growth? Should we be trying to grow as a business? Is that a good thing? Or does it have dangers in it? Well, let's talk about that. And so the Bible has a lot to say about all of those topics. And so we go through. Well, we pick 52 different topics throughout and we go through 52 topics, but it takes us like 4 years to go through those 52 because we only meet once a month. But that's part of our discipleship for ourselves, is how are we growing as leaders before God so that we can lead well as Jesus Christ would lead. And he was the greatest leader of all time. We just have to look at the Bible and see what he taught to notice.
Yeah, for sure. So at this time, I want to remind anybody who might be watching that if you have questions for Kurt, you can put them in the chat and he will be happy to answer them. And for those of you who may not be watching or listening to this live, we will give you Kurt's contact information at the end of the show so that you can reach out to him directly if you still have questions. And I do see that we had several people saying hello on the chat. Somebody, Paula, says this is a great topic. Thank you, Paula. And then she also went on to say, I desire all of this in my business. And we have so many people saying hello. So hello to everybody who's watching live right now. Please give us your comments and your questions, anything that you are thinking that's on your mind right now. Feel free to put it in the chat, even if it's not a question, even if it's a statement like what Paula just shared. So, Kurt, with this next question, and again, I want to remind people, if you didn't already put your biggest struggle in the chat, do that now, because that's what we're talking about now. So, Kurt, what do you believe is the biggest struggle that Christian business leaders face in today's culture?
Wow, today's culture is really interesting, isn't it? I mean, this is historic in what we're part of right now with COVID-19 and a lot of the social unrest and the politics and the divisiveness of our culture that is pretty powerful. And so this feels really challenging for us all right now. So there's unique struggles, I think, that are related directly to that.
Mm-hmm.
And so, I'll get to that, I guess, in a second. I think the biggest struggle that I've seen just historically, without talking about those details for a minute, is how do I treat people? I mean, that's a real nutshell, Barbara. I mean, I'm compressing that really, really significantly, but
Yeah.
how do I treat my people? How would God have me treat my people? Some of these guys came from a history where people were simply tools, right? I have a goal in mind. I have maybe a top line revenue that I need to achieve, or I want to retire to Florida when I'm 52. I don't know. There could be a lot of these goals in mind, and the employees become a tool to help get the entrepreneur to that place.
Yeah.
Now, once you discover this identity in Jesus Christ, you realize that that's no longer true.
Mm-hmm.
That they're way more than tools for me.
Right.
Okay, then now what do I do? And that becomes, I think, the topic of conversation that we have, I would say 80% of the time. How do I
Okay.
treat my employees? How do I treat my customers? How do I treat my vendors in a way that is right and good,
Mm.
and not just as a means to an end for myself?
Well, and I think you could probably even add to that list, how do I treat just everyday people that I might come into contact with, including prospects and leads, right? Like, I think people go to networking events just to hand out business cards, but really, how could we treat people there or in the
Yeah,
grocery store?
right. And people respond to that. And this isn't, I'm not saying this so that it becomes a networking tool. That's not what I mean at all. But people who know you are connecting with them, like you care about what they're talking about right now.
Yeah.
Like you are asking questions and you're sincere and you're looking them in the eye, and that it matters to you what they're saying, that matters to them. This
Yeah.
person at a certain level cares about me in this moment. And all of us need that. We all need to be cared about. We all need to be loved. That's just how we're put together as being made in God's image. We understand love and the ability and the desire to give it. And I'm saying that in a very appropriate way.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and when people realize you are connecting with them and that you care about them,
Right. As a
that
person.
matters. Yes, that matters to them at a very deep level.
Yeah. No, I could definitely relate to that. And I'm sure everyone listening to this can recall a time when somebody really made them feel special just by listening. And you probably can remember a time when someone made you feel not so special because they weren't listening when you were talking or crying or whatever. Um, Kurt, we have so many great questions in the chat. Do you see them?
Yeah, well, I'm just starting to read them now. So sorry,
Yeah,
I've been kind of focused,
I'm
but
gonna
yeah, I'm
put a
catching up.
I'll put a couple up for you, okay? First answer
Okay.
it very quickly because I know we already answered this one, but what is legacy? Asked by my beautiful friend L. Renee Richardson.
Hello, Renee. Legacy is a ministry for business leaders to come alongside them and to equip them and encourage them and to inspire them to lead their business for the Lord, for the kingdom of God, while remaining a for-profit viable company, but all to start to use that position to really bless others and to honor God. I mean, that's to boil it really, really down. We do that by getting like-minded entrepreneurs together once a month, and we have specific conversations together, open-ended questions to have a conversation about what that could look like in your context, and then to encourage you to take your steps. What does that mean for you? Okay, then let's take the step, and then let's talk about it next month and see how it went, and we'll just continue to walk this out together instead of walking it out alone.
Yeah. And El Renee, pay attention later for Kurt's contact info because you and him should definitely talk. Kurt, just a quick bit about El Renee is that she is running a ministry similar to this with her business. She was from Chicago. She's moved to Atlanta. I believe she's still in Atlanta, but she would be an amazing contact to start a forum out there, just
Oh
so you
yeah,
know.
awesome.
Okay.
Let's talk.
Yeah, let's go to another great question. Oh, my good friend Dave Dewar, he's one of my biggest supporters. I adore him so much. What does the Bible say about fear and how it relates to today? For those of you
Oh,
who might be listening next year, today means we're in the middle of COVID-19.
yeah, right. Wow. Well, so the Lord calls us often to not be afraid, because He knows we are. So there's two things in there, I guess. First of all, He understands fear. He understands that we have a tendency to be afraid when we are involved in situations we can't control, or situations we don't understand, that we're not clear about. We are easily brought to a fearful place. But what's so magnificent about walking with Jesus is that He has already seen what's ahead. He has gone before us. He walks alongside us. He calls on us to trust Him because He has our life literally in the palm of His hand. He says, fear not. Now, that doesn't mean you get to go jump off a cliff and see if He's going to catch you. That's not the point. The point of that is just walk with me. Trust me. I have you. Let's be reasonable, but let's not be fearful. Let's look to the Lord. Let's know what He says, which means we have to be studying, but getting back to the whole idea of discipleship. We have to know what He says in His Word. We know what is true, and then stand on that truth for all we have, because He's got us way more than anything else has us.
Yes. Yes. I like that answer, Kurt. Thank you for sharing. And thanks for asking, David. All right, here's another one. And I think a lot of women specifically can relate to this one. This one comes from Amber, who is my wonderful assistant. She says, my biggest struggle is being kind to those who are nasty to me. So, Kurt, what kind of advice do you have with that?
Oh, Amber, you are not alone. Yeah, because it's difficult, right? Because when we get hurt, we want to lash back, right? That's a reaction, right? And it is based a little bit on fear. Getting back to the question before from David, it's just we're fearful of what you're attacking us or something like that, and so we want to react to protect ourselves. And some of that is to run away, or some of it is to fight back. Some of it is to freeze up altogether. I mean, these are all fight and flight kind of responses to people that are being unkind or nasty. And so that's again a natural thing. There's not a, well, you just do this kind of answer to that, other than you need to be really grounded in who God is. You need to allow Him to strengthen you to not react in the way that the world would react. That doesn't mean you get to be a rug where people just walk on you. That's not the point either. But how do you respond to people who are being nasty to you and showing them love? And love can mean, I'm sorry, but you don't get to say that to me because it's not true. It's just simply not true. And so we're going to stand on what's true. And let me tell you what is true. Like there's a strength in being able to stand in the truth of the situation. And the other thing is often when people are being nasty, they're reacting out of their own fear for some reason. And not to get into all the psychology of that, because there may not be time or relationship for that, but just to understand that that's what they're doing, and maybe there burbles a nugget of compassion in us for them, that even though they're being nasty out of pain, and maybe that helps a little bit. The last thing I would say is when the situation is over, when you do extricate yourself from that situation, I would encourage you that you would pray for that person with their face in your mind or their name in your mind if you know it, and lay them before the Lord and let God work with them, because they need Him desperately. They need Him desperately.
Yeah, and in fact, Kurt, one thing I'd add to that is that, believe it or not, I have a bully in my life. She's been here for almost 2 decades. But I used to call her a mean girl, and my husband said I can't call her that anymore. I have to call her a lost girl, and he's right, because I keep unforgiveness in my heart the more that I say things like that, and so I have to be able to speak to her as God's child and to love her even though she doesn't seem to want to love me. And one of the things I learned at the women's encounter, it was really powerful for me. One of the ladies, and I don't even remember which leader said this, but one of them said, pray for your enemies and those who persecute you for what you want God to do in your life. And at first I was like, yeah, right. But then I went home and God convicted me. And so I started praying for this woman for so much goodness. And tears were falling out of me, and it was very difficult, but it was the beginning of my real forgiveness. Like, I thought I had forgiven her for what she had done to me over the years, but I didn't. I was holding it in, and then when I started praying good things for her, that's when I began to heal with that, and let go and release that unforgiveness into God's hands.
Oh, that is such a great point. So when we start praying for people that are, quote, our enemy, is when God starts to change our heart toward them, because he always starts with us. That's part of discipleship too, is always allowing God to change us first. And so when we get changed, man, I'm glad you brought that up. It gives us the ability to forgive. And then when we forgive them, we don't carry that resentment that we may have had earlier back into the relationship again. It goes away, and we don't have to carry it anymore. And it's just a lightening for us all. So, man, so glad you brought that up, Barbara.
Yeah, for sure. All right, we have a few more questions. I want to get to all of them if we have time, but let's see. All right, this one comes from Paula. She asks, are we selling out or playing it too safe if we want to bring prayer, discernment, sacred scripture into our businesses without aligning with a particular dogma or doctrine?
Well, I guess Paula, that's a very deep, profound question you're asking. If we are stewarding something for God, and God owns all things, and so he owns our business, then I think we have the opportunity to be brave and courageous. I think, though, that has to be underlined with love, though. So there are people that may engage your business or be even employed by your business that don't know the Lord, and that's okay. That's okay. They don't have to yet. But what we do get to do is bring the Spirit of God and the love of God into our business and let it influence everybody. Now, how we do that is something that needs to be talked through and cared about. For instance, there's a business that I know that I think does this really, really well. And one of the ways that they've decided to do this is they have what they call one-on-ones. And these one-on-ones is a supervisor will meet with all of their direct reports once a week for an hour, paid by the company, and it's actually the employees' meeting. They can talk about whatever they want to talk about. It's up to them. So this isn't how do we get you to do your job better or anything else. That isn't the point. The point is how do we care for you as an individual, and you can talk about anything you want. And the first few times, that conversation's a little strange and awkward because it's the kind of thing that's never happened before.
Yeah.
But over time, those relationships or that conversation becomes this incredible safe place for the employee to bring into the conversation stuff about their own life. And now the supervisor has an opportunity to help them work through things in their life that they're struggling with. They discover things that are going on at home that they didn't know before. They discover struggles that they've had from since they were a kid that they bring into the business. Not that we need to be the psychologist or the counselor or councilman or anything else, but that just is a way for us to show love to these people. And the company says, and we're going to pay for the time. Now, this company has 200 employees. So that's a lot of time every week. That's 200 hours of time, unproductive, every week that they pay for. It's a way for us to use our business to bless the people within. So there are creative, powerful ways that we can structure our business based on fundamental biblical principles, and we can be all about those biblical principles. We can be all about we are going to be united in this business. That's a biblical principle. How you apply it then in your company becomes a way for you to influence people whether they know the Lord or not with the love of God. These are just some creative ways that we can come up with to take this business and really let the Lord pour through it.
Yeah, I love that. And I will share just a brief little bit about my story. Most of you who are watching this know a lot about my story, but there are a few that don't. But I didn't grow up in church, and I actually am only about 5 years new as a believer, but really about 2.5 years as a very committed believer. And like I'm all in, and I really do put God first in everything in my business or everything in my life, including business, marriage, parenting, like everything I do. I've been striving to try to go to God first, like in prayer and in my alone time with Him before making decisions. That's one place I still struggle. Many times I make a decision and then I ask God, "Oh, by the way, I did this, so can you bless it?" And I know it needs to go the other way around. But one of the things I did in 2019 before the pandemic hit, I actually rebranded my business after taking almost a whole year off because we had really severe family issues that needed my attention. So I pretty much closed my business for all of 2019, reopened it late in the year, in the winter of 2019. And when I reopened it, I decided to rebrand it as a biblically based business. And at the time, I didn't know what that meant. And then God started introducing me to people like Kurt who could help me understand what that meant. And I started first, and one of the things I learned too that we don't have time to go into right now, but there's a difference between a Christian business and a kingdom business. And at first, I started off as a Christian business, which is great. It was a great start for me, but I kept feeling a call of some sort that it needed to be different than what I was doing, and I didn't understand what or why or how. And then I was introduced to kingdom business. And so I've been on this journey, and I'm still on the journey, ladies and gentlemen. I have by no means arrived, and that's why I'm excited to be part of leadership or the legacy leadership forums, because it's so comforting to know that there are other women out there that can help me walk through my business, through my struggles, through do life with me. And men who are watching this, there are many of men's groups. I'm just mentioning the women one because that's what I get to be part of. But anyone who's interested in having that kind of group, it's kind of like a board of directors or board of advisors, right? Make sure that you watch for Kurt's contact information because it's out there, it's available. And if you don't belong to something already that can move you into God's kingdom with other people, in your business, this is a great start to do that. So Kurt, thank you for that. I don't know if there are any other questions yet. I'm going to go into a fun segment, but if anyone does have questions, feel free to ask because we will have a time for a couple of more questions. Um, Oh, Paula just mentioned that she would like to she'd love to learn more about the difference between a Christian business and a kingdom business. Paula, don't let me forget, I will send you some information about what I learned, but Kurt can actually help with that as well. So watch for his contact info.
Yeah.
All right. So, Kurt, the next part of the podcast, I like to go into some fun stuff. So, not that what we haven't been talking about isn't fun. It's just it's just more of a personal fun than business fun. So we take a step from business for just a moment. And the first thing is what I like to call brag time. And brag stands for Barbara's random acknowledgement of greatness. So every week I just like to talk great about someone and I never tell them that I'm talking about them. I always hope they're watching the show, but a lot of the people aren't yet because I'm not as famous as I'd like to be yet. God help me. But for today, I want to acknowledge, believe it or not, for the first time doing this on my show, I'm acknowledging my husband, Isaac Carr, because he's simply amazing. He's been so supportive in everything that I've done, including when God moved me from being a business owner into more of a housewife. We made the decision to, we didn't need income on my behalf. He was going to bring in all the income. And I struggle a lot with that because I'm so used to being part of the breadwinning. And so, but there are times when it's like I start getting frustrated with finances and he'll just sit me down and be like, babe, there's no need to be frustrated. God has this. Just pray to God, tell him what we need, trust God, right? And a lot of times it's so hard for me to hear that because I'm like, you're not looking at the numbers I'm looking at. but he's so right. And there have been times that like he's told me give a whole paycheck to to the church or whatever, and I'm like, no, like I got to pay bills with that. And he would encourage me that no, this is what God told me to do it. And I get really nervous, and then God shows me his faithfulness. He shows me that things still work out even when, especially when we're faithful and obedient, right? And of course not just with finances, with the kids, with I cry over everything, and he's so sweet and understanding, and it's really nice to have a husband who loves me so much but loves the Lord so much also. And I just adore that. And I don't think I thank him enough and tell him how great he is. So this is his chance. And I don't know if he's watching right now, but maybe someone will tag him to tell him that I love him. Okay. So anybody who loves cash, say I, right? So we are going to give $50 cash. This has been a running contest that is yet to get a winner. The next segment we're about to do, I need a title. The last title was called Brag Time. Remember, that was a fun thing that included my name and all that good stuff, my personality. I can't find a fun title for this next segment. I don't want to call it this or that, which is what it is, because that's boring, and Barbara's not boring. Uh, Maybe that's what I'll call it. Barbara's not boring. I'm just playing. But if you think of a good title for this, put it in the chat on the YouTube channel. I only look on the YouTube channel because this airs so many places that I only look in one place to make it easier on me. So if you have a good name, go to the YouTube video of this and put it in the comments, and then you could win $50. All right, Kurt. So how this works is I will just say 2 words to you, and you will just pick one of those words and go with it with how you will. So for instance, if I said coffee or tea and you said coffee, don't just stop with coffee. Tell us what brand of coffee you like, why you like it, and things like that. Easy enough?
Sure.
And for those of you who are watching, put your answers in the chat as well so that you can participate. All right, Kurt, question number 1. Music or art?
Oh, music. Music. The reason, I know. The reason that I bring up music is because I love listening to music all the time. I've got on my headset most of the time. It's the thing that brings me into worship the fastest, honestly. There are certain songs I can hear and I'm in worship in like 5 seconds. And that is unique for my life. That's unique. So I just love that. I can think back through songs I've heard back through my history, and it brings me right back to certain memories, way back when. It's just the music is associated with a memory. And I love that reality. So yeah, I love music much more than visual art. Actually, I don't connect really all that much with visual art. So music is big for me.
Okay. And I agree. Music for almost all the same reasons you said, although my whole family is artistic except for me. Um, my daughter is great with especially painting. But Lisa Winstead actually agrees with you. She chose music. And so that was a fun question. Let's move on to question number 2. Indoors or outdoors?
Oh, super easy. Outdoors. Outdoors.
Wow.
I can't wait to get outdoors. I mean, we spend our whole 3 months of the year outdoors, and then I'm trying to figure out excuses to get outside all winter. I just love being outside. Being indoors bores me, I guess, to be honest with you. After a while, 4 walls are just 4 walls. I need to get outside and enjoy the trees and the wind and even the cold and snow. I love cold and snow. So 4 seasons outdoors, playing with my dog, snowmobiling, kayaking. My wife and I love to kayak together. Running. I just love being outside. I'd go camping instead of sitting in my living room.
Well, you could. I was gonna say you could camp in your living room, but that defeats the purpose of it.
Yeah, right.
So lots of people agreeing with you in the chat, including Paula, who says outdoors. I actually, if I had to choose one or the other, I do choose indoors, mostly because, you know, it's cold outside most of the time, like you said, and there are bugs outside. And I'm trying to become an outdoor person because my husband prefers the outdoors. And so I bought him a tent for his birthday. Hopefully we'll get to use it and go camping someday, but you know, so I'm working on it. I'm not there yet. All right.
Well,
And then last question.
okay.
And this one I did specifically for you. I've not asked this question yet on the podcast. So Paul or Timothy. And so for those of you who may not know who Paul or Timothy are, this means mentor or mentee.
Paul, and you know, that's actually a more challenging question than you might think for me. But yeah, definitely Paul, because Paul is entrepreneurial and so am I. I like doing new things. I like to imagine doing new things and then seeing if we can achieve them. Paul was very much about breaking, you know, barriers down. All through his ministry, he was, you know, sent out into Asia and places that nobody had ever been before with the gospel, and he got a chance to do that, although it was really, really difficult and put his life on the line several times. But there is, for me anyway, a little sense of in danger. So I'm somewhat of a risk taker. I like taking risks, and so I think I would much more align with the way Paul would do things and the way Timothy would do things. Not to take anything away from either one. That's just me.
Yeah. No, I love that. And you know, I heard somewhere, and I don't remember, I always wish I remember where things come from, but I do so much development that I don't always remember. But somebody once said, we should all be a Paul and a Timothy at the same time. And at first I was like, what does that mean? And so I really kind of dove deeper into it, kind of like what you do with legacy, right? You dive deeper into what things really mean. And it was like, yeah, I could definitely see people in my life right now that are mentors for me, that like God specifically put here to guide me. But then I could also see people in my life that look up to me for guidance. And sometimes I'm like, I don't even know why this person's looking at me. I don't feel qualified, but they do. And so I was able to say, yeah, you know what? I am a Paul and a Timothy at the same time, which is pretty cool.
Oh, it's a great place. I think we can all try to go there. I think we can all look for people who've been further down the road than us and to learn from them. There's a certain humility that says I need to learn from people who know more than me. But there's also the appropriate sense of, okay, I'm down the journey a ways. I can turn around and help some people that aren't quite as far down the road as I am. And I think that would be a good way to spend some of my time.
Yeah, for sure. All right, so let's make sure we get your contact information out here. So for those of you who are just loving what we're talking about, Kurt is available to do an informational lunch meeting to give you even more great, awesome news about what Legacy does and how you could be part of Legacy. So we're going to get his contact information. Kurt, I know you said you can find Kurt on LinkedIn as Kurt Koster, or you could email him as well at kkoster@legacyleadershipforums.org. And also on that website, legacyleadershipforums.org, there are videos and information that will allow you to learn even more if you're the type of person who likes to research before really talking face to face with somebody. So you could do that and then reach out to Kurt so that you can find out more about how to get involved, because these are monthly meetings. The women's one that I belong to, we meet on May 13th, I believe, is our meeting. So you might be able to still get into that group, but you would want to reach out to Kurt soon and he'll connect you with Carla. And if you're a man, there are multiple groups you could be part of. So reach out to Kurt. He'll tell you more.
Yep.
And so, Kurt, I know that you said a practical next move action step for people would be to check out the website, which does have those free videos on it. Is there anything that we did not talk about that you want to make sure people know before we go?
I think I would just finish with this, is that for those of us that are entrepreneurs that know Jesus Christ as their Lord and Savior, You have the most amazing call I think that I have ever been across. The opportunity to reach so many people. And I don't mean just evangelism. That's not what I'm talking about, really. I'm talking about just to touch them with the reality of Jesus Christ, because whatever room you walk into, Jesus walks in with you. That you have this amazing opportunity to change the world, your world. And so whether you're part of Legacy or not, I mean, we're here to help in any way that we can, but this is your calling with Jesus Christ. This is your walk with him. He has a calling on you to walk this out. So I would just say, be bold, step out, be if you've got an inner itch to do something new, do something new. If you want some help along those lines or some fresh ideas or something, give us a call. We'd be glad to help. But this is an opportunity for you to really change your contextual world. And man, do we need it. So please be bold and just take whatever step God's kind of poking you about, take it. Just take the step. You'll be amazed.
I like that. And Kurt, I know that, are you going to the Kingdom at Work conference at the end of the month?
Yeah, I'm taking my staff on a retreat there.
Nice. So Isaac, my husband, and I, we are going as well. So for those of you who might want more of this kind of thing, there is a conference in Texas at the end of the month. You can reach out to Kurt or myself for information about it. It is an organization that Kurt's organization supports, and that, now I'm becoming a supporter of as well, because I've been to a few of their events. And we actually got an Airbnb, and we have some availability if people want to get tickets, even though it's short notice and you need a place to stay. Just let us know. And then as far as a Legacy goes, Kurt, you guys have some events coming up as well too, right?
Yeah, so we've got a marriage retreat event for the membership coming up. We're pretty excited about. We always do an annual prayer retreat, which is really interesting. And I say this with a little bit of a smirk on my face, because it's a silence and solitude retreat. It's an overnight, but for 8 hours, it's just you and God. And most of the time people look at me like, you've got 3 heads, man. I'm never, ever doing that. I can't pray for 10 minutes, much less for a whole day. But we walk alongside you with it. There's lots of tools to use. It's actually one of the best days you could possibly have. Once somebody actually submits to going, they are changed, and they say, "Oh, why don't I do this all the time? I should always do this." One of my favorites lately has been Hotam Torres, Barbara, whom you know, who
Yes.
did that, and God he changed his whole world. He came out of that so jazzed. And it wasn't because of us. It was because we simply set the table and let people who wanted to speak with God for a day, and it changes them in the most amazingly wonderful way. So we do that every October. Go ahead.
I am really looking forward to that. Do you have the dates of that already?
It'll be in September. I'd have to pull them out for you, though, Barb.
Okay, that sounds good. And so, you guys, this is exciting stuff. God wants us to have an abundant life. So if you want to be around other people walking this path, make sure you reach out to Kurt. And we'll put his contact information in text with this video as well, and with the podcast for anybody who's watching it later or listening to it later. All right, Kurt, thank you so much for being here. And thank you all to everybody who was a guest or an attendee watching and participating. I really, really appreciate every single one of you. And I will pray for each of you individually tonight that God will bless you. So thank you so very much. Have a good one, Kurt.
Thanks. Bye, everybody.